Deep within the heart of ancient Greek philosophy, amidst the endless reflections on being and knowing, Plato, one of the most luminous thinkers of antiquity, offered a truly unique and profound metaphor to help us understand the human soul, the image of a chariot. This gentle allegory, woven into his dialogue, Phaedrus, is not merely a beautiful artistic description, but a comprehensive vision of the inner structure of a person, their aspirations, their conflicts, and their boundless potential. Plato envisioned the soul not as a single solid thing, but as a dynamic and delicate dance between three essential elements, each playing its own irreplaceable part. At the very heart of this metaphor stands the charioteer. He is the embodiment of the rational part of the soul, which Plato called logos. This is not simply the capacity for thought or logical reasoning. The logos is a deeper yearning for truth, a quiet desire to know the essence of things, a gentle pull towards wisdom. The charioteer is our inner guide, our steady hand, striving to comprehend the higher principles of existence, to distinguish between goodness and harm, between what is true and what is a fleeting illusion. He is armed with knowledge, with prudence, and the serene power of rational contemplation. His sacred task is to consciously choose the path, guided not by the sway of emotions or the pull of instincts, but by a profound understanding of what is right and what is ultimately best. This reasoning part of the soul seeks order, it seeks harmony, it seeks a genuine knowledge that transcends the mere experience of the senses. It is that quiet inner voice that points towards our moral stars, guiding us toward the realization of a virtuous and fulfilling life. Without its gentle guidance, the soul would wander, lost in the shadows of ignorance and chaos. Beside the charioteer, yoked to the chariot, are two horses, each symbolizing other parts of the soul, each so different in its fundamental nature. The first horse is noble, so very noble, filled with a graceful strength and a quiet dignity. This horse embodies the spirited part of the soul, which Plato named thymos. Thymos is not just a simple will to desire, it is the inner drive that yearns for honor, for recognition, for a sense of worth and glory. It is the very source of our courage, our bravery, our ability to overcome the mountains before us and to endure through hardship. This noble horse is obedient to the charioteer. Its movements are confident and resolute, and it is ready to give all of its energy to reach a chosen goal, so long as that goal aligns with its own deep-seated need for nobility. It symbolizes our capacity for self-affirmation, for the struggle for what is just, for defending our convictions, even in the face of peril. This part of the soul is that inner fire that helps us follow the whispers of reason, even when doing so requires great effort and self-sacrifice. The thymos blesses a person with persistence, with perseverance, and the strength of self-discipline. It longs for greatness and for perfection in all its actions, serving as a natural ally to reason in the gentle pursuit of the good. The second horse, however, is unruly and wild, disobedient, and brimming with passions and insatiable appetites. This horse symbolizes the desiring part of the soul, which Plato called epithymia. Epithymia is connected to all of our earthly bodily needs and our sensual pleasures, hunger, thirst, our longing for touch, our desire for comfort, for wealth, for ease. This horse does not always yield to the charioteer. Its instincts are powerful, and it often pulls the chariot in wayward directions, tempting it with the promise of fleeting pleasures and the siren call of sensual indulgence. Epithymia can be stubborn, unmanageable, and even dangerous if it is not gently restrained. It is the source of so many conflicts within the soul, for its desires often clash with the rational goals of the mind and the noble aspirations of the spirited heart. Without proper control from reason's steady hand, this passionate part can lead a person down a path of vice, a place where momentary gratifications hold sway over long-term well-being and moral principles. And so, Plato presents the human soul as a beautifully complex system where three different forces are in a constant flowing interplay. The task of the charioteer, the rational mind, is not to destroy or to suppress the horses, but to harmonize their movements, to guide their immense energy into a single purposeful stream. Only then can the chariot of the soul drift towards its true destination, towards the knowledge of the good, towards self-perfection, and towards a happy, virtuous, and balanced life. This metaphor softly underscores the fundamental role of reason as the guiding light, a force that must maintain a delicate balance between the noble ambitions of the will and the powerful, yet often chaotic, impulses of our passions. Without such a balance, the soul would be forever torn between conflicting desires, never knowing true inner peace or a sense of wholeness. To understand this structure is the very first step towards self-knowledge and the cultivation of an ethical way of being, for it is only by becoming aware of these inner forces that we can learn to gently guide them. After we have drifted into Plato's gentle metaphor of the chariot, where the soul appears as a union of a charioteer and two horses, the time has come to look more closely at the key figure of this vision, the charioteer. In Plato's philosophy, the charioteer does not simply drive the chariot, he is the living embodiment of the rational part of the soul, known in the Greek tongue as logos. This concept lies at the very heart of Plato's entire world of ethics and knowing, for it was within the logos that he saw a person's capacity for true knowledge, for self-perfection, and for a moral life. The logos is not merely intellect in its modern sense, which is often confined to the ability for logical thought or the solving of problems. For Plato, logos is a far broader and deeper phenomenon. It encompasses the ability to apprehend truth, not the truth of the sensory world, which is forever shifting and changing, but the eternal, unchanging ideas. It is reason alone, in Plato's view, that serves as the unique instrument, allowing a person to ascend beyond the illusory world of fleeting sensory impressions and to grasp the perfect ideal forms. The charioteer yearns to see things as they truly are, to distinguish the essence from the appearance, the eternal from the ephemeral. This profound striving for true knowledge makes the logos the highest and most noble part of the soul. The function of the charioteer, this rational part, is one of gentle guidance and of bringing things into order. Imagine a charioteer who possesses not only the strength to hold the reins, but also the wisdom to see the road ahead, to know the journey's purpose, and to anticipate the obstacles along the way. In the very same manner, reason must guide the other parts of the soul, the spirited and the desiring parts. This guidance is not a suppression or a destruction of these other parts, but rather their harmonization. Reason, like a masterful conductor, seeks to make each instrument, the will and the passions, play in perfect unison, creating a single beautifully coherent melody of the soul. It determines which desires are fitting, which actions are just, and which aspirations are truly noble. One of the key characteristics of the Logos is prudence. This is the capacity for quiet, measured judgment, for a rational choice among different paths. Prudence allows the charioteer to assess a situation, to foresee the consequences of his decisions, and to choose the way that leads to genuine good. It stands in stark opposition to the impulsiveness and recklessness that so often command the passionate part of the soul. Reason also possesses the gift of self-reflection, the ability to softly analyze its own thoughts and motives. This allows it to constantly improve, to learn from its past mistakes, and to become an ever wiser guide. Plato emphasized that it is precisely this rational part that carries the highest virtue, wisdom. For him, wisdom is not merely a vast collection of knowledge, but a deep, quiet understanding of the universal principles that govern the cosmos and human life. It is the ability to see the truth, to know what is good and what is not, and to build one's life in accordance with this knowing. A wise charioteer knows where and why he is steering the chariot, for he is aware of its highest purpose. He is a light that gently scatters the darkness of ignorance and error. The rational part of the soul also plays the decisive role in the shaping of ethical choice. All moral decisions, according to Plato, must flow from reason, for it is reason alone that is capable of distinguishing true good from the illusory good by which the desiring part is so often tempted. When a person makes a choice guided only by their appetites or emotions, they act without wisdom, and their actions can lead to inner chaos and suffering. In contrast, if a choice is grounded in rational contemplation and a yearning for truth, it leads to harmony and justice, both within the person's inner world and in their gentle dance with the world outside. Within the metaphor of the chariot, the charioteer's role is not an easy one. He is under constant pressure from two powerful horses, each with its own nature and its own deep-seated yearnings. The wise charioteer does not attempt to break the will of the horses, but rather channels their strength toward achieving a common higher goal. He uses the energy of the spirited part for a resolute push forward, while simultaneously reining in the unruly, passionate part, so that its desires do not pull the chariot from its true course. This requires constant, gentle attention, self-control, and a profound understanding of the nature of both his own and of others' aspirations. Therefore, the Logos is not some abstract philosophical concept. It is a living, active force within every human being, a force that strives for knowledge, for harmony, and for the creation of a virtuous life. It is through this rational part that we are able to rise above our instincts and emotions, to become the true masters of our own destiny, and to steer our own inner chariot toward the highest of all purposes. The role of the charioteer is to illuminate, to direct, and to bring a gentle order, ensuring our inner integrity and our movement toward the ideal. As we continue our gentle journey into the world of Plato's allegory of the soul chariot, we now turn our soft gaze to the second, no less vital, participant in this vision, the noble horse. This horse, unlike its unruly companion, is the very embodiment of the spirited part of the soul, which Plato called thymos. The thymos is a deep and vibrant current of energy, which in the design of the wise charioteer is meant to serve as the driving force for reaching the highest of aims. Thymos is not simply pure will or a mere desire. It is that tender aspect of our soul that yearns for honor, for true glory, for gentle recognition, and for the quiet harmony of justice. It feels an inner pull toward nobility, toward dignity, toward a state of moral grace. This horse symbolizes our capacity for courage and for bravery, not only in a physical sense, but in a moral one as well. It does not fear hardship. It stands ready to overcome obstacles and endure great trials for the sake of higher ideals. When reason, the charioteer, softly points to the righteous path, the mose is that inner strength that follows its call without hesitation, even if doing so requires effort, self-restraint, or even brings it into peril. A special quality of the noble horse is its natural resonance with reason. Unlike the desiring part, which often resists the gentle guidance of the rational mind, the mose, being noble by its very essence, is inclined to yield to wisdom. It feels a deep inner pull toward what is right, toward what is just. Its energy can be channeled into defending the truth, protecting the vulnerable, and achieving good for the whole community. It is that part of us that stirs with a sense of indignation at injustice, that inspires us to fight for what we believe in, and that gives us the strength to hold fast to our principles. Courage is the central virtue connected to the themos. For Plato, courage is not a thoughtless bravery, but the quiet ability to hold fast to reason's judgment about what ought to be feared and what ought not, even when faced with danger, pain, or temptation. It is the capacity to move through fear and remain faithful to one's convictions, especially when the unruly horse of the passions seeks to flee or to give in to some fleeting lure. Courage allows the spirited part of the soul to effectively help reason in gently controlling the passions, preventing them from steering the chariot astray. It reveals itself in our resolve and our steadfastness in upholding our moral principles. Beyond courage, the noble horse symbolizes our self-discipline and our self-control. When reason establishes rules and boundaries, thymos is the part of the soul that helps us to abide by them. It gives us the strength to turn away from momentary pleasures for the sake of long-term goals, to subject our desires to higher aspirations. It is our inner fortitude that does not allow us to surrender in the face of difficulties, but instead mobilizes all of our strength to overcome them. The thymos inspires us toward ambitious achievements, toward the search for our own perfection, and gives us the capacity to stand our ground. The spirited part of the soul plays a critically important role in the formation of our character. It is the very foundation for the development of such qualities as determination, perseverance, and responsibility. Without a strong thymos, even the wisest mind might find itself powerless against the onslaught of passions or external obstacles. It is the soul's executive power, the part that transforms the quiet decisions of reason into living reality. When a person resolves to act in accordance with moral principles, it is the thymos that provides the inner strength to see that decision through. However, like any other part of the soul, thymos too must listen for the guidance of reason. If this spirited part acts on its own, without proper direction, it can become a source of pride, of hollow arrogance, of aggression, or of an unfounded stubbornness. An uncontrolled will can transform into a destructive force, one that seeks glory for the sake of glory, or power for the sake of power, instead of serving a higher purpose. The noble horse, if left unguided, might charge ahead thoughtlessly, ignoring dangers to itself or to others. This is why the charioteer must hold the reins firmly, yet gently, directing this powerful energy toward constructive and noble ends, rather than destructive or selfish ambitions. In a harmonious soul, according to Plato, the thymos is a trusted and faithful ally of reason. It acts as a watchful guardian of rational decisions, helping them to withstand temptations and external pressures. This beautiful cooperation is the key to our inner integrity and our ability to live in accordance with our highest principles. A strong spirited part makes it possible to realize our intellectual aspirations and to control our passions, thus creating a firm foundation for a virtuous life. It is our inner pull toward greatness and perfection, guided by the wisdom of reason, and so the noble horse in Plato's metaphor is not simply a symbol of emotions or instincts, but the very embodiment of an inner spirited power that reaches for moral perfection and is ready to yield to the wisdom of reason. It is the source of our courage, our self-discipline, and our ability to overcome life's challenges, so long as its energy is properly guided by the charioteer. It is that part of us that allows us to become steadfast and consistent in our gentle striving for the good. After we have softly examined the roles of the wise charioteer, the embodiment of reason, and the noble horse, the incarnation of the spirited soul, the time has come to drift deeper into the nature of the final yet no less significant participant in Plato's allegory, the restless horse. This horse symbolizes the passionate, desiring part of the soul, which Plato called epithymia. The epithymia is the lowest, yet at the same time the most powerful and immediate force, one that constantly demands instant satisfaction, forever in motion and in search of something more. Epithymia is not merely a collection of separate desires, but the entire sphere of our earthly needs and our sensory whispers. It encompasses the basic instincts that ensure our physical existence and survival: hunger, thirst, and the urges of the body. Beyond this, it also includes the wider yearnings for comfort, for coziness, for rest, and for the avoidance of all pain and discomfort. It is also the pull toward material things, toward wealth and luxury, as well as the longing for entertainment, for ease, for the simpler paths in life. The restless horse is a vivid symbol of our inner nature that constantly seeks fleeting gratification, focusing only on the present moment, and often giving no thought to the long-term echoes of its impulses. Its primary motive is pleasure, and it will strive to attain it at any cost, if it is not gently held in check. This part of the soul is known for its insatiability and its inconstancy, like a deep, silent well that can never be filled. Epithymia is always yearning for something more, something new, and its satisfaction often proves to be merely a fleeting moment, giving birth to a soft, unending chain of new and different desires. Today it is one pleasure, tomorrow another. It can be greedy, gluttonous, and prone to excess in all things, in food, in drink, in entertainments. Its impulses are exceedingly strong and often come into direct conflict with the rational decisions of the mind and the noble aspirations of the spirited heart. This is the very horse that tugs the chariot this way and that, heedless of the path the charioteer has chosen. Whenever it is tempted by the lush grass on the wayside, a shimmering object, or a cool spring of water, it follows its momentary urges without pausing to reflect on their purpose or their consequences. The disobedience of this restless horse is one of its most fundamental traits. It is not inclined to yield to the charioteer, reason automatically, or with a willing heart. Epithymia often acts on the principle of I want it, here and now, ignoring the rational arguments or moral boundaries set forth by the mind. This leads to inner conflicts, a time when a person understands that certain desires are harmful, unwise, or even immoral, yet the passionate part still insists on their fulfillment, creating a gentle yet persistent inner discord. This constant inner struggle is what makes the governance of the soul such a difficult yet profoundly important task for every human being. The role of the passionate part in a human life is twofold, and it cannot be reduced to a purely negative aspect. On one hand, epithemia is a source of life's energy and a driving force. Without basic desires such as hunger, thirst, or the need for sleep, a person could not survive and sustain their existence. It is our passions that stir us to action, to the search for new experiences, to creation, and to growth. A healthy appetite for life, a striving for pleasure from beautiful things, such as the enjoyment of music, art, or nature, the joy of connection with others. All of these belong to the realm of epithemia when it rests under the proper guidance of reason. It gives life its colors, its emotions, its vibrant pulse. However, on the other hand, if epithemia is not guided by reason, it can become a source of deep vice and silent suffering. Uncontrolled desires can lead to gluttony, to lust, to sloth, to greed, to anger, to envy, and to other ruinous passions that destroy both the inner world of a person and their relationships with those around them. When the restless horse gains the upper hand, the chariot of the soul can veer from the true path, wander into dangerous thickets, or fall into the abyss of self-destruction. A person completely subject to their passions loses the capacity for rational thought, for moral choice, for self-control. They become a slave to their own desires, which contradicts Plato's vision of a virtuous and truly free life, where a person is the quiet master of their own destiny. This is precisely why Plato emphasized the critical need for control over the passionate part. This does not mean the complete suppression of desires, for that is impossible, and just as importantly, unnecessary. Total suppression can lead to a gray apathy, a loss of life's energy and joy. The goal, instead, is harmonization, to teach the restless horse to yield to the charioteer, allowing it to find pleasure, but in measure and in accordance with reasonable limits. Here, the virtue of temperance comes to our aid, a virtue that allows the charioteer reason to effectively govern the passions, not allowing them to spill out of control. Temperance involves the ability to distinguish healthy, beneficial desires from excessive, harmful impulses that could bring harm to oneself or to others. It is the art of finding the golden mean between full indulgence and complete denial. In Plato's system, the restless horse is a constant test for the charioteer. It is a dynamic challenge that demands from reason not only knowledge, but also a quiet strength of will and a capacity for self-control. The interplay between reason, will, and passion is a ceaseless dance that requires constant attention. A state of inner harmony or justice of the soul is reached only when each part fulfills its own function under the guidance of reason. The passions are satisfied in measure. The will directs its strength toward noble aims, and reason wisely guides this entire system, ensuring its wholeness and its direction. Only then can the soul move toward true goodness and happiness. Becoming aware of the existence and the nature of the restless horse is the very first step toward mastering it, so that it might become not a source of chaos, but a wellspring of life's energy, channeled for the good and the gentle growth of the soul. Having looked in detail at each of the three parts of the soul in Plato's allegory of the chariot, the rational part, the charioteer, the spirited part, the noble horse, and the passionate part, the restless horse, it is now time to softly unite these elements and focus on Plato's central, quiet truth that reason is the soul's true sovereign and must play the guiding role. This principle is the very cornerstone of his ethical tapestry, the one that defines the path to harmony, to virtue, and to a genuine, lasting happiness. Plato held a firm belief that only the rational part of the soul is capable of apprehending the truth, of distinguishing good from evil, and of determining what is truly good for a human being. Unlike the sensory passions, which are shifting and often deceptive, and unlike the spirited strivings, which, though noble, can be blind without proper direction, reason possesses the unique capacity for rational knowing. It is the lighthouse that casts its gentle beam into the darkness of ignorance and error. Reason can see the universal principles, the eternal ideas that lie at the foundation of all that is. This allows it not merely to react to external stimuli or inner impulses, but to form conscious decisions that resonate with the highest moral harmonies. Reason's guiding role means that it must be the conductor of our inner orchestra. It should not suppress the other parts of the soul, but on the contrary, channel their vibrant energies into a constructive flow. Imagine an orchestra. Each instrument, the violin, the cello, the flute, has its own unique voice and potential, but without a conductor who knows the score and is able to coordinate their efforts, only a chaotic noise will arise. It is the same within the soul. The passions provide the energy of life. The will gives the strength for action, but only reason can compose from this a harmonious symphony of life. It decides when and how the voice of each part ought to sound. It is reason alone that is capable of determining the destination of the chariot's journey. The passions yearn for momentary pleasure. The will seeks recognition, but only reason can see the wider picture, can become aware of the true purpose of human existence. This purpose, according to Plato, lies in the attainment of goodness, truth, and beauty, in the cultivation of virtue and inner justice. Reason establishes the long-term goals that extend beyond fleeting desires, and it develops the strategy for reaching them. It is a kind of architect, one who drafts the plan and structure of a life, while the other parts of the soul are the builders who realize this gentle blueprint under its guidance. Control over the passions is one of the most vital aspects of reason's guiding role. The restless horse of epithymia constantly seeks to satisfy its desires, regardless of the consequences. Reason, with the help of temperance, must restrain these impulses, allowing them to manifest only within acceptable and gentle boundaries. This does not mean an ascetic crushing of all desires, but their wise and thoughtful ordering. For example, reason will permit a person to eat in order to sustain life, but it will not allow gluttony to bring harm to their health. It will permit a striving for material goods as a means for living, but it will not allow a greed that leads to injustice. This is the subtle art of finding a balance, where reason serves as the gentle measure. At the same time, reason must guide the spirited part. The noble horse, thymos, is filled with energy and a yearning for action, but without the wise leadership of reason, its energy could be spent in vain or even become destructive. For instance, courage without reason can devolve into recklessness. The desire for glory can curdle into vanity, and the defense of justice can become an uncontrolled aggression. Reason directs the spirited part toward noble ends, toward the development of true courage that serves the truth, not selfish ambitions. It is the quiet compass that shows the direction for our powerful will, so that it does not lose its way. Therefore, the guiding role of reason is the very key to inner harmony and wholeness. When reason gently presides, each part of the soul performs its function as it should, without clashing with the others. This creates a state of inner quiet and delicate balance, which Plato identified with the justice of the soul. Such a soul, like a well-steered chariot, moves with confidence toward its destination, never veering from its course under the influence of external temptations or inner conflicts. The person in whom reason is sovereign is the master of themselves, not a slave to their own passions. To ignore the guiding role of reason leads to chaos and discord. When the passions take over, a person becomes impulsive, unrestrained, and incapable of consistent action. When the will acts without reason, it can be stubborn and destructive. In both cases, the inner equilibrium is disturbed, which leads to dissatisfaction, to suffering, and to the loss of the ability to find true happiness. Plato considered such a life unworthy of a human being, for it fails to realize its highest and most beautiful potential. Learning and education, according to Plato, should be aimed precisely at the development of the rational part of the soul. This means not just acquiring knowledge, but forming the capacity for critical thought, for the philosophical contemplation of being, for an understanding of eternal principles. It is a lifelong process, a constant perfecting of the charioteer, so that he may become ever more wise, more far-seeing, and more graceful in the steering of his own inner chariot. And so in Plato's philosophy, reason is not merely one part among others, but the soul's chief architect, its strategist, and its gentle guide. Its quiet leadership is fundamental to reaching inner harmony, moral virtue, and a full and beautiful human life, where one consciously chooses the path toward true goodness. We have now looked in detail at each of the three parts of the soul within Plato's gentle allegory of the chariot: the rational part, the charioteer; the spirited part, the noble horse; and the passionate part, the restless horse. We have also come to understand the leading role of reason as the soul's sovereign. Now, as a gentle and logical continuation, we shall drift deeper into the immense significance of reason's guidance for attaining a true inner peace and the overarching harmony of a human life. Plato emphasized that without the dominant, directing, and ordering role of reason, the soul will inevitably and softly descend into a state of chaos, of discord, of ceaseless inner conflicts, and unending sorrows, losing its wholeness, its capacity for productive action, and most importantly, its path to genuine happiness. This is not merely a theoretical guideline, but a vitally important principle for anyone who gently strives for perfection. The central and perhaps most crucial aspect of reason's guiding significance is the attainment of inner equilibrium and harmony. Imagine a chariot where each horse pulls in its own direction, following only its own instincts and desires, while the charioteer is either entirely absent or far too weak and unable to hold the reins. The result of such unguided motion would be an inevitable and gentle ruin. The chariot would fly from the road, it would shatter, and its passengers would come to grief. It is the very same with the soul. The passions, the restless horse, by their very nature are impulsive. They seek immediate, often thoughtless gratification. paying no mind to long-term consequences, moral norms, or rational limits. The will, the noble horse, though filled with energy and noble impulses, can become blind and stubborn if it lacks a clear, wise direction from reason, risking a charge in the wrong direction. If reason fails to perform its fundamental function as a regulator, these two powerful forces begin to struggle against one another, creating an endless rift and disarray within the soul. Inner peace, according to Plato, is possible only when reason acts as the peacemaker, the organizer, and the chief coordinator, wisely directing the actions of all parts of the soul, leading them toward a single common and, most importantly, good purpose. It is the force that secures the inner polity of the soul, where each part takes its proper place and fulfills its proper function. The absence of such wise and steady guidance from reason leads to internal conflict and a deep sense of division. Imagine a person who understands, in the quiet light of their reason, the absolute need to follow a healthy way of life, for this is the call of their rational part, which seeks goodness and longevity. Yet their passions, unchecked and ever yearning, pull them ceaselessly toward harmful, though delicious, foods, toward sloth and inaction. Or consider another example. A person knows clearly that they must work on an exceedingly important task that will bring significant good, but their spirited part, perhaps through pride or stubbornness, refuses to cooperate, or their passionate part seeks only entertainment, ignoring all duty. This constant rift between what a person knows to be right and necessary and what they are urged toward by their uncontrolled desires, emotions, or ill-conceived ambitions creates a profound sense of dissatisfaction, of chronic anxiety, of inner discomfort, and constant disquiet. These are not just unpleasant feelings. This is a quiet, inner war that constantly exhausts a person, draining their energy and preventing them from acting effectively, both in their inner world and in their dance with the world outside. Furthermore, ignoring the guiding role of reason leads to a loss of wholeness and a fragmentation of the self. Without the wise guidance of reason, a person becomes not a single, whole being, but a mosaic of conflicting impulses, of disconnected desires, and of inconsistent actions. Their actions become chaotic, their character unstable and ever-changing. Today they may be guided by one set of principles, and tomorrow by entirely different ones, completely under the sway of circumstance or emotion. Such a person, in essence, is not the master of themselves, but rather a will-less slave to their passions, to external temptations, or to random influences. They lose that inner core that allows them to remain true to themselves, to their values, and to their highest aspirations. Reason, in contrast, grants the soul a sense of unity, of consistency, and of inner fortitude, weaving all of its aspects into a single, harmonious, and functional whole. It gives a person a sense of an inner center from which they can ground all of their decisions. Another vitally important consequence of lacking reason's guidance is the inability to make a truly ethical choice. Moral decisions, according to Plato, cannot be based solely on feelings, instincts, or personal preferences, as these are fleeting, subjective, and often self-centered. Only reason, which strives for objective truth, for universal principles, and for the higher good of all, can distinguish the shimmer of true good from the illusion of good, which often only masks itself as good but in truth leads to harm. If the passions dominate, a person will choose what brings momentary pleasure or benefit solely to themselves, even if it harms other people or the community as a whole. If the will acts without reason, it can be blind in its resolve, leading to recklessness, aggression, or injustice, as its energy is not directed toward truly noble goals. The guidance of reason allows a person to make a conscious, well-founded, and morally responsible choice, one that is grounded in an understanding of goodness and justice, and that leads to virtuous conduct both in one's personal life and in one's interactions with society. This ensures a moral orientation and a responsibility for one's own actions. When reason takes on its guiding role, it allows a person to live consciously, meaningfully, and with a quiet purpose. They do not simply react to the events that unfold around them like a ship without a rudder in a storm, but actively and gently shape their own life, consciously setting goals that align with their highest aspirations and purposefully striving to reach them. Reason gives a person the capacity for self-development and self-perfection, which is a continuous and gentle process. It constantly analyzes its own experience, draws lessons from its mistakes, and seeks ways to improve all parts of the soul. This is not a passive role, but an active, dynamic process of constantly schooling the horses so that they become ever more obedient, more effective, and work together in harmony like a single beautiful mechanism. Such development leads to a growth in inner strength and wisdom. Ultimately, without the guidance of reason, a person cannot reach that true, deep, and lasting happiness that Plato envisioned. Happiness, for him, is not a simple collection of fleeting pleasures, not something external that can be acquired. On the contrary, happiness is a state of inner harmony, of virtue, and of the soul's alignment with its true and ideal nature. If the soul is in a state of chaos, torn apart by inner conflicts, constantly under the pressure of contradictory desires, it cannot be truly happy, even if all its passions are temporarily and superficially satisfied. True, deep happiness arises exclusively from inner order, from the fact that each part of the soul is fulfilling its function properly under the wise, impartial guidance of reason. This happiness is a quiet and steady flame, independent of external circumstances, for it comes from the soul's own inner harmony and wholeness. It is the result of a conscious life, directed toward goodness and truth. And so the significance of reason's guidance for inner peace is utterly fundamental in Plato's philosophy. It is the key to inner balance, to the integrity of the self, to the capacity for responsible ethical choice, to a conscious and meaningful life, and also to the attainment of true, lasting happiness. This is not just a theoretical concept for academic discussion, but a practical path towards self-perfection, toward a harmonious existence for a person who is fully realizing their potential. Reason is the light that scatters the inner darkness, the compass that points toward the true direction, and the architect that builds the firm and beautiful foundation for a worthy life. We have now seen how vital the guidance of reason is for warding off inner chaos and finding harmony. Now, we move gently toward the culmination of this idea, the justice of the soul. For Plato, justice is not merely an external category, one that relates to laws or the dealings between people in society. First and foremost, justice is an inner state, a quiet harmony of the three parts of the soul where each performs its proper function under the wise guidance of reason. It is this very inner order that is the key to a virtuous life and to true happiness. Imagine a state. If justice reigns within it, then every citizen and every social class fulfills its duties without meddling in the affairs of others, and all of this unfolds under the leadership of wise rulers. In a similar way, Plato envisioned the soul. The justice of the soul is when the rational part, like a wise ruler, guides; the spirited part, like a valiant guardian, supports and defends the decisions of reason; and the passionate part, like diligent citizens, satisfies its needs within reasonable limits, without striving for excess and without disturbing the others. When this inner order is established, the soul reaches a state of perfect and graceful functioning. The harmony of the inner world is the very essence of the soul's justice. It is a state where the three powerful forces, reason, will, and the passions, do not conflict, do not pull in different directions, but act in concert like a single finely tuned musical instrument. It is when the charioteer, reason, holds the reins firmly, the noble horse will steps forward with resolve, and the restless horse, the passions, submits to his direction, not attempting to veer from the course for the sake of a fleeting pleasure. This harmony means that each part of the soul is given its proper place and its proper role, and none of them attempts to usurp the power of another. The passions do not dictate the terms, the will does not become blind and stubborn, and reason stands as the supreme arbiter and guide. But why, precisely, is this harmony justice? According to Plato, justice consists in rendering to each its due. In the case of the soul, this means that each of its parts must perform the function for which it was designed by its very nature. Reason is meant to guide, the will is meant to support, and the passions are meant to be satisfied in measure. When this happens, the soul exists in a state of inner wholeness and quiet health. Just as a healthy body is one where every organ works as it should, so too a healthy, which is to say a just, soul is one where all its parts exist in their right and proper relationship. The absence of the soul's justice, which is its inner disharmony, leads to a sickness of the soul. This can manifest in various forms. If the passions dominate, a person becomes a slave to their desires, which leads to reckless behavior, moral decline, and a loss of self-respect. If the will breaks free from the control of reason, it can lead to arrogance, recklessness, aggression, and tyranny. In any case, this inner disorder destroys the personality and renders it incapable of a happy and fulfilled life. A person who lacks inner justice cannot be just in the outer world, for their own actions will be but a reflection of their inner chaos. The attainment of this inner harmony and justice of the soul is not a singular event, but a constant, gentle process. It requires ceaseless self-analysis, self-control, and self-cultivation. The charioteer, reason, must continuously train his horses, the will and the passions, so that they become ever more obedient and yielding to his guidance. This means developing the corresponding virtues for each part: wisdom for the rational part, courage for the spirited part, and temperance for the passionate part. These virtues are inseparable components of inner justice, for they are the very expression of the harmonious work of each part of the soul. When the soul reaches this state of inner justice, it finds the capacity for true happiness. For Plato, happiness is not simply a collection of external goods or pleasures, but the result of inner order and virtue. A happy person is one whose soul is in harmony, who is guided by reason, and who lives in accordance with higher principles. Such happiness is a steady flame, independent of the shifting winds of the outer world, for it comes from an inner spring. This gives a person an inner freedom, an independence from the dictates of desire and the whims of circumstance. Furthermore, inner justice is the very foundation for outer justice. Plato believed that a person who cannot establish order in their own soul cannot be just in society. A just state, in his view, is possible only when its citizens are themselves internally just. In this way, the harmony of the individual soul is the prerequisite for the harmony of society. A person who has balanced their own inner forces will be better able to understand and contribute to justice in their relationships with others, in their professional life, and in their contribution to the community. And so the justice of the soul, which reveals itself in the harmony of its three parts under the guidance of reason, is Plato's highest ideal for human existence. It is not a mere philosophical abstraction, but a practical path to a fulfilled, meaningful, and happy life, where a person's inner world exists in a state of perfect order and balance. To achieve this state is the goal toward which every person should gently strive, by cultivating the self and overcoming all inner contradictions. We have now drifted deep into the concept of the soul's justice, understanding it as an inner harmony achieved under the wise guidance of reason. Now, as a gentle continuation of this understanding, we turn to a closer look at the virtues that are fundamental to establishing and sustaining this harmony. The first, and, without question, the most vital among them is wisdom, which is the exclusive virtue of the rational part of the soul. For Plato, wisdom is something far greater and more profound than simple erudition, the accumulation of many facts, or mere intellectual skill. It is a special, deep state of knowing, of contemplation, and of understanding, which allows the charioteer reason not only to effectively guide the entire chariot of the soul, but also to steer it toward its higher, truer purposes. Plato defined wisdom as the capacity for true knowledge, which is fundamentally different from mere opinion, belief, or superficial impression. Mere opinion, which Plato called doxa, may be correct by chance, but it is not rooted in a deep systematic understanding of causes, essences, and interconnections. Wisdom, on the contrary, is the result of grasping the eternal, unchanging, and perfect ideas that dwell in a higher, intelligible, ideal realm. It is not simply knowledge of how things appear, but an understanding of what they are in their essence, their true nature. The wise person, according to Plato, is one who, like the freed prisoner from his allegory of the cave, can see not just the flickering shadows on the wall, but the true source of the light, the idea of the good, which is the wellspring of all being, truth, beauty, and morality. This allows them to make right decisions, not only for their own well-being, but for the common good, because they can see the universal principles. Wisdom is the guiding virtue precisely because it gives to reason, the charioteer, the necessary knowledge, the clear signposts, and the fundamental principles for the successful guidance of the other parts of the soul. Without wisdom, reason would wander in the darkness of ignorance, lacking a clear vision of the journey's true purpose, or of how to effectively control the powerful horses, the will, and the passions. Wisdom provides foresight and a quiet deliberation in the making of decisions. It allows the charioteer to resist the momentary, often destructive impulses of the passions or the blind, unthinking urges of the will. Instead, wisdom makes it possible to see the long-term consequences of one's actions, to anticipate potential difficulties, and to choose the path that leads to true, lasting good, not to fleeting pleasures or illusory gains. This is not merely a passive avoidance of error, but an active, conscious shaping of a life in accordance with the highest ethical and ontological ideals. One of the key aspects of wisdom is the gentle capacity for discernment and evaluation. Wisdom allows one to distinguish true goodness from the semblance of good, which can be exceedingly attractive to the passionate part of the soul. It helps to tell true values apart from deceptive, false notions that are often imposed by the outer world, by social norms, or by personal biases. The wise person understands that material wealth, external fame, status, or momentary sensual pleasures are not true, self-sufficient goods if they do not serve the higher purposes of the soul, if they do not lead to inner harmony. They know how to separate the precious from the worthless, the essence from the superficial illusion, and this allows them to make choices that align with their true, rational nature, rather than with the dictates of fleeting desires. This is not just knowledge of good and evil, but the ability to apply this knowledge in practice within the complex situations of life. Wisdom is also intimately connected with deep self-knowledge. Plato believed that one of the most important injunctions, know thyself, is fundamental to wisdom. The wise person understands not only the external world, its laws and principles, but also their own inner essence. They are aware of the structure of their soul, their strengths and weaknesses, the nature of their desires and aspirations, and their inclinations towards certain passions or expressions of will. This self-knowledge allows reason to better control the will and the passions because it understands their inner workings, the reasons for their behavior, and can find the most effective ways to guide and harmonize them. Without this deep inner understanding, the governance of the soul would be but a blind attempt to influence something unknown and uncontrollable. The flowering of wisdom is not a singular event, but a ceaseless, active process that unfolds over a lifetime. It is not an innate gift, but a continuous conscious striving for knowledge, for truth, for a philosophical contemplation of being. This requires constant learning, a deep immersion in philosophical reflection, the development of critical thinking, the capacity for uncompromising self-analysis, and a readiness to cast off false beliefs, even if they are familiar or comfortable. Wisdom is acquired through the constant efforts of the mind, through a true philosophy, which means quite literally the love of wisdom. It is through this relentless pursuit of knowledge and truth that the charioteer becomes ever more skilled, more experienced, and more wise in his art of guidance, and his control over the chariot of the soul becomes ever more perfect. This is a constant inner work upon the self. Wisdom not only ensures the inner harmony of the individual soul, but it is also the foundation for the just governance of society. Plato, in his monumental work, The Republic, argued that the ideal state must be guided by philosopher rulers, those who have attained wisdom and are able to see the idea of the good, and who therefore understand what is truly just and good for all of society. This is the direct extension of the principle of inner justice to the level of society. A wise ruler, much like a wise charioteer, knows what is best for the whole, for the entire community, and is able to direct the actions of all citizens toward the common good, avoiding selfishness and conflict. In this way, wisdom is not only a personal virtue, but also the highest social virtue, the very key to prosperity, stability, and justice in the great state. And so for Plato, wisdom is the very pinnacle of all virtues of the rational part of the soul, its highest achievement. It is not simply knowledge, but a deep, universal understanding of truth and goodness that allows reason to effectively guide all other parts of the soul, ensuring inner harmony, justice, and wholeness. It is that bright and steady light that scatters the darkness of ignorance and illusion, that reliable compass that points the way to a virtuous, meaningful, and happy life, and that unshakable foundation upon which Plato's entire ethical system is built. Without wisdom, any attempt to guide the soul would be but a wandering in the dark, and a person's life an unrealized potential. It is the greatest gift and the most vital task of the human mind. We have now looked in detail upon wisdom as the highest virtue of the rational part of the soul, serving as the light and the compass for our inner life, providing guidance and a true direction. Now, continuing our contemplation of the soul's harmony and its virtues, we turn to the next key, vitally important virtue, courage. This is the virtue that belongs to the spirited part of the soul, which Plato, in his allegory of the chariot, presented as the noble horse. Courage, according to Plato, is not merely the absence of fear or a thoughtless, reckless bravery. It is the conscious, deep ability of the spirited part to support the decisions of reason, to hold to the right path, and to act with a quiet resolve in the face of any hardship, danger, external pressure, or inner temptation. It is the active expression of the will, guided by reason. For Plato, true courage has nothing in common with that unthinking bravery which can lead to senseless and ruinous acts. It is not simply physical bravery, although that may certainly be one of its expressions in certain situations. True courage is the ability to hold fast to reason's right judgment concerning what is to be feared and what is not, even in the face of great pain, real danger, harsh social condemnation, personal loss, or a threat to one's own life. The noble horse, thymos, is a symbol of strength, of energy, and of resolve. Courage allows it to direct this powerful inner force toward the unwavering support of the charioteer's reason's decisions, preventing the unruly horse, the passions, from steering the chariot off its intended course through panicked fear, laziness, a yearning for easy pleasure, or the avoidance of discomfort. It is that unshakable inner support that allows a person to remain true to their principles and not to retreat from the truth, even when circumstances become exceedingly unfavorable. Courage is intimately tied to a quiet steadfastness, an unshakable resolve, and a gentle perseverance. In life, numerous obstacles and trials inevitably arise, both external hardships, illness, poverty, social injustice, the loss of loved ones, failures in our endeavors, and internal trials, doubts in our own abilities, despair, deep fear, inner conflicts. The courageous person does not fold before these challenges, nor do they yield to despondency. They find within themselves the inner resources to continue acting in accordance with their highest convictions and rational decisions, even when the path becomes exceedingly difficult, uncomfortable, or seems to lead nowhere. This steadfastness flows directly from the spirited part of the soul, which, when guided and trained by reason, transforms difficulties not into insurmountable barriers, but into opportunities for its own growth, for the strengthening of character, and for development. It allows a person not simply to survive in difficult conditions, but to thrive with dignity in spite of them, maintaining their inner wholeness. One of the most vital aspects of courage is the ability to stand against the whispers of inner and outer temptations. The restless horse of the passions constantly pulls toward momentary fleeting pleasures, which at first glance seem attractive, but may be harmful or even immoral in the long run. The courage of the spirited part plays a key role in helping reason to effectively restrain these powerful urges. This does not mean a complete suppression of desires, for that is impossible and unnecessary, but rather their controlled and reasonable guidance. For example, a person may feel an exceedingly strong temptation toward rest, entertainment, or inaction, when it is actually necessary to work on an important project or fulfill their duties. Courage, in this case, manifests in the ability to turn away from this temptation, remaining true to one's duties, to the long-term goals defined by reason, and to one's responsibilities. It is also the courage to resist strong social pressure that urges conformity, the acceptance of questionable values, participation in immoral acts, or the abandonment of one's own principles. True courage allows a person to go against the current if truth and justice so demand. Courage, in Plato's understanding, is also the unshakable defender of justice and moral principles. The noble horse, as the guardian of the soul, stands watch over the moral imperatives and ethical principles that have been realized and defined by reason. When reason determines what is just, right, or good, courage provides the inner strength to uphold this justice, even if it requires struggle, personal sacrifice, risk, or conflict. This might be the courage to speak the truth in the face of falsehoods when it is dangerous, the courage to defend the weak, the downtrodden, or the unjustly wronged, the courage to fight against injustice in society, even if it means standing against the powerful of this world. Without courage, even the deepest understanding of justice might remain a mere theoretical knowledge, powerless and unembodied in real, active deeds. It is the active force that transforms ethical principles into real actions, giving them practical meaning. The cultivation of courage, like the cultivation of wisdom, is a constant, purposeful process of nurturing the spirited part of the soul. It requires continuous training, strict self-discipline, and constant practice in overcoming both small and great difficulties. Just as a strong horse is trained to be not only powerful, but also obedient and gracefully guided, so too must the spirited part be nurtured, so that it is steadfast, reliable, and always supportive of reason. This means purposefully learning to overcome laziness, to conquer fear, to control anger, and to develop endurance, patience, and resolve. This can include both physical exercises that temper the body and the will, and mental training that teaches one to manage emotions and to concentrate on a goal. Every time a person consciously chooses the difficult but right path, every time they stand against inner or outer pressure, they inevitably strengthen their courage, making it more resilient and dependable. If the spirited part of the soul is not properly developed, or is not under the effective guidance of reason, it can lead to two ruinous extremes: cowardice or recklessness. Cowardice is when the noble horse completely yields to fear, to inner or outer pressure, and refuses to move forward, leaving the charioteer helpless before life's challenges. This leads to passivity, the avoidance of responsibility, and an inability to realize one's potential. Recklessness, on the other hand, is when the spirited part acts too impulsively, too thoughtlessly, seeking glory, battle, or risk for their own sake, without regard for rational assessments of the situation, potential consequences, or real threats. Courage is that golden mean between these extremes, allowing one to act decisively, but always thoughtfully, with deliberation, under the control of reason, choosing the best path. It is a vitally important virtue of the spirited part of the soul, one that is necessary for the harmonious functioning of the entire human being. Courage is that active force that allows reason to translate its wise decisions into life, to overcome any obstacles, both external and internal, and to successfully resist the temptations that can lead one astray. It is the inner shield that guards justice and gives a person the capacity to live with dignity, with bravery, and with consistency, even in the face of the greatest dangers and trials. Without courage, the wisdom of reason might remain mere theoretical knowledge, unembodied in real actions, and the soul would be weak and unable to overcome the challenges of life, which would inevitably lead to inner disarray. It is necessary so that the noble horse may fulfill its role as the devoted, powerful, and resolute ally of reason on the path to a virtuous life. Now, to complete the picture of Plato's harmony of the soul, we turn our gaze to the final, yet exceedingly vital, virtue, temperance, or moderation. This virtue belongs to the passionate part of the soul, which Plato, in his allegory of the chariot, presented as the restless horse. It is temperance that is the very element allowing the charioteer reason to effectively control and guide the least yielding, yet at the same time most powerful and immediate force within our soul, the realm of our desires, our instincts, and our pleasures. Temperance, or as it is often translated, moderation or self-restraint, is the key virtue that gently tames the unbridled appetites of the restless horse. It possesses the ability to bring order to the numerous and often conflicting desires of the passionate part, not allowing them to transform into insatiable and destructive passions. For Plato, this virtue does not mean a complete suppression or an ascetic renunciation of all bodily pleasures. On the contrary, temperance is the gentle art of finding the golden mean, of allowing desires to manifest within reasonable limits, limits that do not harm the health of the soul or the body, that do not conflict with the decisions of reason, and that do not hinder the attainment of higher goals. Why is it so important to guide our desires and passions? If the restless horse is left unwatched and without clear boundaries, its impulses become dominant. This leads to excess, to gluttony, to the overuse of drink, to an uncontrolled thirst for material goods, to excessive idleness, to an irresponsible sexuality. Such excesses not only harm one's physical health, but they also lay ruin to the inner world of a person, making them a slave to their own instincts. A person subject to uncontrolled passions loses their freedom, for their actions are dictated not by reason, but by blind, often mutually exclusive, urges. They become impulsive, inconsistent, and their life turns into a constant chase after fleeting pleasures that never brings true lasting happiness. Temperance gives the charioteer reason the strength and the skill to guide these desires. It allows reason to determine which needs are truly necessary for life and which are excessive and potentially harmful. It is the capacity for self-control and inner discipline that allows a person to turn away from momentary pleasure for the sake of long-term goals, moral principles, or a higher good. For example, a person guided by temperance might limit themselves in their food to maintain their health, even though they feel a strong desire to eat more. They might refrain from senseless spending in order to save for more important things, or set aside entertainment for the sake of study or work. This virtue ensures inner peace not through suppression, but through a gentle ordering. When the passions are under the control of reason, they cease to be a source of chaos and conflict. Instead, their energy can be channeled toward the achievement of positive goals. For instance, the energy of desire can be transformed into the motivation for creativity, the striving for knowledge, or the drive for development. Temperance allows reason to use the potential of the passionate part to support the overall harmony of the soul rather than to destroy it. This creates a feeling of inner tranquility, as the soul is no longer torn between contradictory impulses. The cultivation of temperance requires constant practice and self-nurturing. It is not an inborn trait, but the result of conscious effort. It means learning to recognize one's desires, to understand their nature and their power, and to consciously choose which of them ought to be satisfied and which ought to be restrained. It is the process of teaching the restless horse to yield to the reins, to become more predictable and less prone to unthinking urges. This can include meditation, the practice of mindfulness, and the conscious limitation of oneself in certain pleasures in order to strengthen the will and discipline. Every conscious refusal of an excessive desire strengthens the virtue of temperance. Without temperance, the human soul exists in a state of constant instability and vulnerability. It becomes easy prey for external temptations and manipulations, as its desires can be readily used against it. The absence of control over the passions makes a person dependent, unable to make rational decisions and to live according to their own values. They lose their inner freedom, for their actions are dictated by external factors or uncontrolled inner impulses, and not by their own free choice, whispered by reason. Therefore, temperance is the fundamental virtue of the passionate part of the soul. It is the means that allows reason to order and to harmonize our desires and passions, preventing them from spilling into excess. It ensures self-control, inner discipline, and allows a person to live in a state of inner peace, where all parts of the soul act in concert under the guidance of a wise mind. Temperance is necessary so that the restless horse does not veer from its course, and so that its powerful energy is used for the good of the entire soul. It is the virtue that allows a person to be the true master of their desires and not their slave. We have now drifted deep into the essence of each of the three fundamental virtues that Plato ascribed to the different parts of the soul: wisdom for the rational part, courage for the spirited part, and temperance, or moderation, for the passionate part. However, to fully grasp Plato's vision of inner harmony, it is not enough to contemplate these virtues in isolation. On the contrary, their truest strength and meaning are revealed only in their gentle interconnection and their graceful, coordinated work. Only when these virtues act in concert under the wise guidance of reason can a person achieve a virtuous life, a state that Plato considered the true purpose of human existence and the key to genuine happiness. Imagine an orchestra where each musician plays their instrument with virtuosity, but if these instruments do not play together under the direction of a conductor who knows the entire score. Then instead of a harmonious symphony, only a pleasant but chaotic collection of sounds will emerge. It is the same with the virtues. Wisdom on its own, without courage and temperance, might remain a mere theoretical knowledge, unembodied in life. Courage without wisdom can devolve into recklessness. Temperance without wisdom might be simple caution rather than conscious control. This is why Plato insisted that true virtue is possible only when they are integrated. Wisdom is the architect and the guide. As we have seen, it gives to reason the ability to see the truth, to understand what is the genuine good and how to attain it. It forms the overall plan and determines the destination of the soul's journey. Wisdom points to which decisions are right, which actions are just, which desires are fitting. It is the source of all the ethical principles that gently guide a person's life. Without wisdom, the other virtues would be blind, lacking a clear direction or an understanding of higher purposes. Courage is the executive force that makes the plan of wisdom a reality. When the wisdom of reason has identified the right path, it is the courage of the spirited part that gives a person the resolve and the steadfastness to walk that path, overcoming any obstacles. It gives them the strength to stand against external pressure, against fears, hardships, and inner temptations. For example, if wisdom points to the necessity of speaking the truth, even when it is dangerous, it is courage that allows a person to do so. If wisdom dictates a fight for justice, courage provides the strength to endure in that fight. Without courage, even the wisest decisions might remain unrealized, dissolving into empty words. Temperance or moderation is the controller and the harmonizer of the passions, ensuring that the plan of wisdom can be executed without internal hindrance. It guarantees that the passions of the restless horse will not steer the chariot from the course set by reason. Temperance allows for the satisfaction of bodily desires in measure, without the excesses that could harm one's health, mind, or morality. It helps a person to avoid the slavery of their own desires, ensuring inner discipline. For example, if wisdom advises moderation in food to preserve one's health, it is temperance that allows the hunger to be restrained. If courage stands against the temptation of laziness, it is temperance that helps to manage the desire for rest when it is time to work. Without temperance, the passions can lay waste to any plan, even the wisest. Thus, the virtuous life is not merely a collection of separate virtues, but a state where all three interact in a perfect harmony, guided by reason. This means that a person not only knows what is good wisdom, but also has the strength to carry it out, courage, and is able to control their desires so that they do not interfere. Temperance. In this unity, each virtue strengthens the others. Wisdom gives direction to courage, courage gives strength to temperance, and temperance preserves the space for wisdom. This creates an inner cycle of self-perfection, where each part of the soul works for the good of the whole. The significance of this interconnection for a person is immense. First, it ensures inner stability. A person whose soul exists in such a harmonious state is not prone to sharp swings of mood, to reckless actions, or to moral failings. Their inner world is well ordered, and they are able to act with consistency and purpose. Second, it leads to true freedom. Plato believed that a person is free not when they can do whatever they please, for that is the slavery of the passions, but when their reason is sovereign and they can guide themselves in accordance with truth and goodness. The interplay of the virtues allows for the attainment of this inner freedom. Third, the interconnection of the virtues is the foundation for moral authority and respect. A person who lives a virtuous life is an example to others. Their words and deeds are consistent. Their character is steadfast. This inspires trust and respect, both from others and from oneself. They feel a quiet dignity that flows from their ability to govern themselves. Ultimately, the virtuous life, according to Plato, is the path to eudaimonia, a concept often translated as happiness or flourishing. This is not just an ephemeral feeling of joy, but a state of fullness of being, of inner harmony, and the realization of a person's highest potential. Eudaimonia is achieved not through external circumstances, but through the inner order of the soul, when reason, will, and the passions act in concert, each in its own sphere, under the guidance of wisdom. This happiness is stable, independent of external trials, because its source lies within the person themselves. The nurturing of these virtues is the chief task of a human life. It requires constant work upon the self, self-analysis, philosophical reflection, and also practice in daily life. Every choice a person makes is an opportunity to strengthen or to weaken one of these virtues, and thus to affect the overall harmony of their soul. Therefore, in Plato's philosophy, the interconnection of wisdom, courage, and temperance is fundamental to achieving a virtuous life. These virtues do not exist apart, but are woven into a single tapestry, where each supports and strengthens the other, allowing reason to effectively guide the soul. This is not merely a theoretical concept, but a practical path to inner harmony, to true freedom, and to a lasting happiness that flows from a conscious and well-ordered existence. Only in this unity can a person realize their highest potential and live a life of dignity. We have now completed our journey through the intricate, yet wondrously logical and profound labyrinths of Plato's allegory of the soul, presented in the form of a chariot. We have looked in detail at each of its parts: the wise charioteer, the rational part, the noble horse, the spirited part, and the restless horse, the passionate part, as well as the virtues that correspond to each of them: wisdom, courage, and temperance. We have come to understand their deep interconnection, and how, by acting in concert, they form the virtuous life. The time has now come to summarize how this ancient metaphor, born thousands of years ago, offers us a timeless path toward inner harmony and perfection in our modern world, a world so full of challenges and rapid changes. The essence of Plato's teaching on the soul is that true happiness and a fulfilled life are not accidents or the result of external circumstances, but are the direct consequence of inner order and self-mastery. In a world where we are constantly bombarded with information, demands, and temptations, it is exceedingly easy to lose our inner balance. The restless horse of our passions may yearn for instant gratification through excessive consumption, through addictions, or through the constant search for external approval on social media. The noble horse of our will may chase after thoughtless glory, after power for power's sake, or after the aggressive defense of its position without regard for rational arguments. Without a wise charioteer holding the reins firmly, these forces will inevitably lead to inner chaos, to burnout, and to a feeling of meaninglessness. Plato's chariot offers us a gentle instrument for self-analysis. It encourages us to ask ourselves regularly, who is guiding my chariot right now? Is my reason, the charioteer, wise enough to see the truth and to set the right goals? Is my will, the noble horse, courageous and steadfast enough to bring these goals to life, overcoming all obstacles? Are my passions, the restless horse, temperate and controlled enough not to steer me from my course, but to serve as a source of healthy, vital energy. This is a constant dialogue with oneself, one that allows us to identify imbalances and to work on gently resolving them. The path to inner harmony, according to Plato, is a path of constant self-perfection and self-nurturing. It is not a singular achievement, but a ceaseless process of teaching and training all parts of the soul. The development of wisdom means not only formal learning, but a constant striving for truth through quiet philosophical reflection, through reading, discussion, and critical thinking. It is the ability to analyze information, to distinguish facts from fictions, to contemplate life's events deeply, and to draw conclusions that are grounded in reason, not in emotion. It is also the capacity for self-reflection, for understanding one's own biases and weaknesses, for becoming aware of one's own motives. It is precisely this constant intellectual work that allows the charioteer to become ever more experienced and far-seeing. The nurturing of courage requires a conscious effort in overcoming our fears, our laziness, our hardships. This can manifest in the ability to take on responsibility, to stand up in defense of one's principles, even when it is uncomfortable or risky. Courage also means the ability to endure emotional discomfort, disappointment, and failure without giving up and without retreating from a chosen path. This is the training of the spirited part, so that it may be a strong and reliable ally of reason, always ready to act according to its commands, even when one must go against the current. The practice of temperance is perhaps the most delicate of all, for it concerns our deepest and strongest instincts. This means not the prohibition of desires, but their ordering and their integration into a harmonious life. It is the gentle art of finding balance in all things, in food, in sleep, in entertainment, in material aspirations. It is the refusal of excesses that harm our health or hinder our minds. It is the conscious limitation of oneself, where overindulgence could lead to dependency or a loss of control. Temperance transforms the energy of the passions from a potentially destructive force into a wellspring of life's energy, one that serves the common good of the soul. When all these elements work in graceful concert, the soul reaches that state of justice of which we have spoken before. This is not simply the absence of conflict, but an active, dynamic state of inner order and perfection. Such a soul is independent of external circumstances, for its happiness flows not from the outer world, but from its own inner constitution. It is not shaken by the winds of fate, but remains steadfast and whole. A person who has reached this inner harmony is truly free, free from the tyranny of their own desires, from the fears that paralyze, and from the external pressures that compel one to act against one's own principles. The relevance of Plato's chariot in our modern world is truly extraordinary. In an age of information overload, of constant stimuli, and of the cult of instant gratification, Plato's teaching reminds us of the importance of an internal focus. It calls us not merely to react to external events, but to actively shape our inner world, to nurture our reason, our will, and our passions. It is a philosophy that transforms us from passive consumers of life into its active creators, consciously building our own inner architecture. The Platonic chariot is more than just a metaphor. It is a roadmap to a full and happy life. It is an invitation to constant inner work, to the philosophical contemplation of oneself and the world. It is a reminder that the most important battle takes place not outside, but within us, and that victory in this battle, which consists in the submission of the soul to reason, is the highest achievement a human being can attain. May this ancient wisdom, like the light of a beacon, illuminate your own path to inner harmony and perfection. May it remind you of your own chariot, of the reins that you hold, and that you yourself are the charioteer who chooses the direction.